Hello, amazing educators, and welcome to your virtual workshop titled Engaging All Students in a Virtual Classroom. My name is Sarah Johnson, and I will be leading your training today. Let me tell you a little bit about Teacher Created Materials. Teacher Created Materials is a family-owned company that began in the garage of a teacher over 42 years ago. Our founder, Rochelle Cracchiolo, envisioned creating a company focused on one vision: to create a world in which children love to learn. All our materials and resources are created by teachers, for teachers and students with this vision in mind. And our founder embodies this spirit in many ways. Here is Rochelle supporting Read Across America at a local elementary school. Rochelle is pictured here with Corrine Burton on the right, the president of Teacher Created Materials, and Deanne Mendoza on the left, executive vice president of Teacher Created Materials, both of whom are also her daughters. The spirit of Teacher Created Materials truly lives in this family. Our primary goal today is to examine strategies to engage all students in a virtual classroom and beyond. We are going to look at very simple ways we can increase engagement, as well as more complex strategies that we can incorporate into our instruction. Our second goal today is to plan ways to incorporate engagement strategies into our own classrooms and instruction. Let's review what you will need in order to be prepared for this virtual training. First, you will need a notepad and something to write with. You will also need your learning reflection guide. Speaking of that learning reflection guide, throughout the webinar, you will occasionally be directed to stop and do something on that guide. Anytime you see this image, you will know that you need to complete a portion of your learning reflection guide. Now, one more thing before we get started. It is important that you know and adhere to your school and district technology policies. The ideas shared today are ideas that can be adjusted to ensure you are able to complete them with ease while following your district policies. Another little tidbit: know your technology. My computer and your computer are different. What might be easy for me to complete on my computer might not be so terribly easy for you to complete on yours. Find the things that you love and utilize those. All right, let's get going. Let's first talk about how to help students get engaged and remain engaged. I'm going to show you a quote by Adam Fletcher. He says this: "Students are engaged when they are attracted to their work, persist despite challenges and obstacles, and take visible delight in accomplishing their work." This is what we want for our students. We want them to be engaged in their work with visible delight. We want them to persevere even if the work is difficult, and gain independence as they experience success. Now, there are many benefits of engagement, so let's take a look at just a few. First and foremost, students have improved academic achievement. When they are engaged, they are also more satisfied with school and the way school feels. They are more likely to persist even when things get challenging. They also typically perform better on standardized tests when they are engaged. Students who are more engaged have better social skills and are even less likely to drop out of school. Now, just looking at this list makes me think, wow, isn't this what we all want for our students? We want our students to enjoy school, to work hard even if the tasks are difficult, and achieve academic success. So let's start by looking at some baseline ways that we can address engagement in our classroom. When we think about the baseline for incorporating engagement into our classrooms, it can start from the moment our students walk in the door or log into our class, and continues until they complete all of their work for the day. Engagement includes a morning routine and greeting, engaging ways to respond or to collaborate, and they occur on a regular basis. Engagement occurs when you strategically consider how you pace instruction and activities, and in the way you signal your students or how they communicate back to you. You can even engage students through think time and with how they move their bodies throughout the day. We're going to start by looking at a very simple engagement strategy that you may have used in your physical classroom in the past, called bell ringers. Now, regardless of whether your students actually come into your physical classroom or log in virtually, bell ringers are activities that students can do as soon as they arrive. They don't include a lot of supplies or preparation, and often ask some kind of question or stimulate problem solving or critical thinking and encourage students' creativity. And it doesn't matter what the subject is. The idea is that bell ringers can open the door to language arts conversations, math talk and problem solving, or science work. It can hook students into social studies concepts and support art, physical education, or even music, and even a foreign language. The possibilities are endless. I want to share a few simple ideas for how to incorporate bell ringers into your classroom. So let's imagine now that we are in a second grade virtual classroom. The bell ringer I'm going to show you helps students activate their mathematical thinking. As students log into their synchronous learning time, this is what they see. Write all the ways to show the number 10. So as students arrive in class, I greet them with a quick welcome and remind them to get started right away on the question they see displayed. As more and more students arrive, they all get to work until everyone is in class. Now, certainly this isn't the only kind of bell ringer I could display. How about this? Here, students are drawing a picture of a plant and labeling all the parts. Or how about this one? Make up a caption for this picture. Students need to analyze the picture and think about the information they have learned so far about solar energy in order to write the caption. You can even use bell ringers as a way to incorporate gratitude, social emotional learning, or community. For example, this bell ringer has students think about the talents or characteristics that make them unique and write about how one of those talents or characteristics makes them feel special. These kinds of bell ringers aren't connected to a specific content area, but are a great way to support students' mental health and growth mindset. Would you rather questions are also great for bell ringers. They can incorporate content area learning, like this one. Would you rather get $10 every day for the rest of your life or be given $10,000 only once? Or they can just be funny or creative to help build relationships and community in your classroom, like this one. Would you rather be able to jump as far as a kangaroo or hold your breath as long as a whale? What I love about bell ringers is that students have an immediate task to get them started the moment they arrive in class. They aren't waiting around for other classmates to arrive and getting bored. They are engaged right away. And depending on your schedule, you can decide how or if you want students to share or to submit you their responses. Now it's time for your first stop and do. Please look at your learning reflection guide and complete the first question. With this response, you need to think about some of the bell ringer activities that you can use to truly engage students in your class with the content area or areas that you teach as they enter your physical or virtual classroom. Try to come up with at least 5 to 10 different questions, prompts, problems, or ideas that students will get excited to sink their teeth into. Like the examples I showed earlier, they can be specific to your content area to support what you are teaching right now, or they could be creative, silly, or reflective to help build community, growth mindset, gratitude, and overall social and emotional support. Press pause when you are ready to begin this stop and do. Press play when you are ready to continue. Welcome back. I hope that you were able to stretch your thinking and come up with at least 5 to 10 bell ringers to get your students engaged right away. Now, I'd like to talk about the idea of focus. Often when we think of being focused, we think of engagement. In order to stay focused on something for an extended amount of time, it must be engaging. However, especially in the virtual world, we have to support students' focus so that they can build their stamina. Let's be real. Our students, especially in the younger grades, will not be able to hone in, engage in, focus on a 40-minute synchronous lesson that involves a lot of lecture. They need to build up their stamina. But in order to be able to do this, we have to support them along the way. For example, we can use music to engage our students. We should also use timers to help students know how much time is left until the end of class or until the next break. This will help us avoid the question of, "Are we done yet?" or "When are we going to take a break?" We can also use small groups to help break up the whole group time and provide students with the opportunity to talk more or collaborate more with the students in their group. Some other things to remember are to be succinct. Screen fatigue is a real challenge that we must be cognizant of. It is true for us as well as our students. A college professor of mine used to say, "Don't say in 17 words what you can say in 7. The same mantra should be applied to virtual teaching. There's no need to go on and on. Keep your instruction clear and concise. We also need to strategically include opportunities for mindfulness. Right now, even if you are teaching in person, instruction looks very different. Students aren't able to interact with others and build the usual social skills that occur in school. So helping our students build their mindfulness is key. Brain research shows that memory and learning are enhanced by incorporating movement into instruction, which is why it is also important to allow students to get up, move around, and use physical motion. Brain breaks are another great way to help students focus. When students can truly let their brains relax for a brief period, they can come back to the lesson or the activity with a stronger focus. Let's talk now about brain breaks. Now, I'm willing to bet that any of you listening to this training who have taught for more than a year have used brain breaks in some way, shape, or form. You know that they work because you have seen how they impact your students' ability to focus. But perhaps you don't know the research behind them. In a 2016 study, psychologist Carrie Godwin and a team of researchers measured how attentive elementary students were during class and discovered that they spent over a quarter of the time distracted, unable to focus on the teacher or the current task. The key was that shorter lessons with brain breaks kept students' attention high. So what does that look like in the classroom? Instead of 30-minute lessons, try 10-minute lessons. Or try breaking the 30-minute lesson into 3 10-minute chunks with a brain break after every chunk. The reality is that brain breaks boost brain function. They increase productivity. They help reduce our students' stress levels. Brain breaks just feel good. They also encourage social skills and social skill development, and ultimately enhance the student's ability to focus by allowing them more time to practice the skill of focusing. One of the easiest and most common brain breaks is movement. In fact, there's a whole section of YouTube devoted exclusively to movement breaks that get students up and moving around. A colleague of mine, Lavana Roth, studies how to apply brain research to classroom learning and instruction. She once said, "If their bums are numb, so are their brains." Meaning, if they are sitting too long without active learning and doing, their brains eventually tune out. This phrase has always stuck with me and affirms the need to get students up and moving often during the day, regardless of whether students are learning inside the walls of your classroom or at home. Here's an example of how to do this. This Padlet has links to a variety of different movement-focused videos. You can see across the top the letters MOVE, time to move. This grid functions like a choice board for students. So let's say that we've just spent 12 minutes working through a math concept. Now it's time for students to have 3 minutes to take a break. I set my timer for 3 minutes, and then they go to choose a video from any of the columns to play on their own for the time allowed. Some students might get super into it and dance around, and others might be a bit more passive and just tap their feet, clap their hands, or sway a bit. That's okay. The point is that they got to choose what they wanted to listen to and relax and move in a way that feels good for them and refocuses their attention to the learning that will be happening next. I want to note that this example shows a variety of videos, but it is important to select ones that will appeal to your own students. And I suggest changing the videos out regularly so that students don't get bored with the selections. Another kind of brain break that is very powerful is a mindfulness brain break. A mindfulness brain break allows students to recognize where they are at, to think about how their mind is relating to their heart. Here is an example of what I'm talking about. We're going to do this together, and I mean really do this together. You may feel a bit silly, but I want you to get a sense of the power of this type of brain break. It is called heartbeat. So the first thing that you're going to do is find your heartbeat. Maybe you take 2 fingers and either place them on your wrist or maybe on your neck under your jawbone. Whatever works for you, just find your heartbeat. Now really pay attention to it. Is it beating fast or slow? Now close your eyes and take a couple deep breaths. Just relax and feel your heartbeat. In a minute, not yet, I'm going to play some music. And when the music is playing, I want you to move around. That doesn't just mean sway back and forth in your chair and wiggle your fingers. It means get up, hop, run in place, do some jumping jacks. Whatever you need to really move around. And as soon as you hear the music, you can get going.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break. I'm a hot air balloon that could go to space. With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way. Because I'm happy, clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy, clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy, clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy, clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Here come bad news, talking this and that. Give me all you got, don't hold it back. Well, I should probably warn you, I'll be just fine. No offense to you, don't waste your time.
Okay, so even though it's hard for me to stop playing that good tune, the music is done. Go ahead and stop moving. Now find your heartbeat again in the same way you did before. Take a few deep breaths and pay attention to your heartbeat again. Ask yourself these questions. What is different? What do you notice? How do you feel? This allows students to just take a moment to think about how their heart reacts to movement. And many students will start to notice that as they move, they begin to feel better. That is mindfulness. Now let's look at some brain breaks that foster students' creativity. Makerspaces. This kind of brain break encourages creativity and design and lets students create things they are interested in and passionate about, which is amazing. I often think of makerspaces as being something to do in person, but there are lots of virtual makerspaces now too, which opens the door to lots of new possibilities. STEAM projects are another great way for students to build, design, and create. They don't have to be extremely complicated with lots of materials. They can be simple with everyday items found around the home. They can use items to build something like a boat or a bridge or a tower. Can they create an airplane out of paper that can fly at least 5 feet? Art and music are powerful tools that can also easily be used as brain breaks. I was in a virtual classroom recently where the teacher had students create their own string instruments using household items, like toilet paper rolls and rubber bands. The strings had to make at least 2 different tones when they were plucked, and the students had to create a video showing how their instrument did that. It was a great way to bring creativity and fun into instruction, while applying some science concepts too. Another opportunity are Genius Hours, where students get to explore topics of their own choosing. There are lots of online resources to help you implement Genius Hours in your classroom. Yoga and stretching are great ways to help students relax and become more aware of their bodies and the other emotions they may be carrying with them while at school or learning virtually. And finally, gratitude journals. This can be an incredibly powerful tool. It allows students to take a break from their learning and the work of school and recognize the things they are grateful for. Overall, these brain breaks allow for students to engage in other activities that help them learn more about themselves, what they are interested in, what sparks their curiosity, how they can be creative, what they are passionate about. So now it's time for our next stop and do activity. Think about the 3 categories of brain breaks that we discussed: movement, mindfulness, and creativity. Take some time to consider each category, whether you are teaching virtually, in person, or in a hybrid model, and consider your students. Who do you actually have in your classroom this year? Based on that, brainstorm and record some brain breaks in each category that you might consider incorporating to help students stay focused and engaged. Press pause when you are ready to complete this stop and do activity. Press play to continue the webinar. Welcome back. Now that you've made a list of the brain breaks that you want to incorporate to keep your students focused and engaged, it's time to talk about how assessment can actually support student engagement. Specifically, we're going to talk about formative assessment. Formative assessment is a way to check in on students' learning. It helps you figure out how things are going with your students, what you know, what your students still need to learn, and what is still confusing for them. This might seem intimidating to accomplish in a virtual setting, since you don't have the opportunity to literally stand alongside a student like you do in a physical classroom. But I'm here to tell you that there are some easy ways to check in with your students and get an understanding of what they really know and can do. The first 2 strategies are thumbs up and fist to 5. Now it's likely you have used these strategies in your physical classroom, but they can work in a virtual setting as well. In a virtual setting, we have 2 options. The first is in the screen. This is when students literally put their hands to the camera to show you their response. They can use thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs sideways to show their understanding. Or using the fist to 5 strategy, 1 finger if you don't understand, 3 fingers is you kind of understand, but maybe still have some questions, and 5 fingers is you totally get it. At first, I may show students a slide like this to help them have a visual cue of what I'm asking and what each number means. Over time, I may take this away and just call out the strategy for the students to respond in the air for in-person learning or in their camera for virtual learning. The most important thing about this strategy, though, is to make sure that you have a positive and safe classroom community environment set up so that students feel comfortable actually sharing where they feel they are in their learning. You want students to feel comfortable sharing that they are a 1, even though some of their classmates may feel they are a 3 or a 4. So that's how you would use those strategies on the screen. The second option is to use a platform for students to respond in, such as Padlet, Jamboard, or the chat box. This option allows students to add more than just a hand gesture to their response. So it's a thumbs up and here's why. Or maybe they are a 3 and they type a question they still have, or explain why they feel they are a 5. It could look like this. Here's an example of a very simple Padlet that you could use for thumbs up, thumbs down. Students can add their response to the questions written. What do you agree with, or what do you not agree with? And then place their sticky notes next to the appropriate icon. With this version, students write at least 2 things they understand if they give themselves a thumbs up. They write a question they still have or something they don't understand if they give themselves a thumbs down. Here's what a fist to 5 Padlet could look like. Each student would add their sticky note in the column where they feel they are at with an explanation of why. Again, you would need to make sure that you have established a safe classroom environment to use the strategy in this way. But what I love about using a platform for these strategies is that you have a record to return to as a teacher. It is more involved than the response in the camera, so you can actually read all of the responses after class and determine who needs reteaching, who you might need to have a one-on-one conversation with, or who is really ready to move on or extend their learning. Another way to engage students in formative assessment is through the use of hands up. Now, obviously, the very traditional approach to this strategy is simply to raise your hand, either into the camera or with a platform signal that most video conferencing platforms have. This shows you who's ready to speak or has an idea to contribute. But you can tweak this ever so slightly to use as a formative assessment tool if you start by saying, put your hand up if. Put your hand up if you have a question about what we just learned. Or put your hand up if you understand what you are supposed to do next. If you see most every hand go up, you know you can set your students up on the next task. If you only see a few hands go up, this lets you know right away that you need to go back over the directions or do some reteaching. This is especially valuable if the next activity involves some kind of asynchronous task or small group work in a breakout room. Another variation is put your hand up when. You can say things like, put your hand up when you are ready to move on, or put your hand up when you found a piece of text evidence to support our claim. This gives you a signal of who is ready and who is still struggling or still working. Another way to engage students in formative assessment that a lot of students enjoy is through brief online quizzes or polls. Here is a poll I recently gave to a group of teachers who I was working with just to get a better idea of who was in my virtual audience. What is great is that as soon as the poll was completed, we could see the results. In this example, the results were for me as a presenter, but imagine if this was a multiple choice question about content I just taught. We could look at the results as a class and discuss them because they populate right away. And since they are anonymous, students often answer more truthfully about their comprehension because there is no fear of being judged for getting a wrong answer. There are many different online poll and quiz makers, such as Mentimeter, Kahoot, and Quizzes. The last engagement strategy for formative assessment that I'm going to share today is called Four Corners. This strategy can be used very similarly to Fist to Five. Here is an example I made using Google Slides, where students would actually move their circle with their initials on it to whichever corner they feel best explains their understanding. From this example, you can see that a few students still need some reteaching, and you likely need to have a one-on-one discussion with the student in corner 1 to see why she is still feeling so confused. Using the strategy like this could also function like a pre- and post assessment. You have students respond at the beginning of a lesson or unit with their understanding, and then again at the end, and compare the self-assessment results to see how students feel they progressed in their learning. Or you could use Four Corners like this, where you provide students with a statement and then they move their circle to whichever corner they feel best shows their response. For example, you could provide students with a statement such as, in the story The Little Red Hen, all of the other animals are acting selfishly when they don't help the hen make the bread. Students can then share out justifications for their response and move to the corners if their understanding or opinion changes as a result. This type of formative assessment gives you both a snapshot of what students are thinking as well as how clearly they can articulate their opinion or reasoning. Now, if you're teaching in person, this same strategy can be used, but instead of being on the screen, you use each corner of your room. So now, we are going to do a Four Corners of our own as a way to wrap up our discussion on this topic. Since we are learning asynchronously, I don't have a way to see your response, so you're just going to have to own it for yourself. Think about formative assessment in your classroom right now. It doesn't matter whether you are teaching in person or virtually, but what does it look like for you right now? Are you a 1? Formative assessment is difficult for you? Are you a 2? You know about formative assessment, but... Are you a 3? You infuse formative assessment on a pretty regular basis? Or are you a 4? You consistently use formative assessment and it's ingrained in how you teach. Now take a look at this sentence frame. I want you to go to your learning reflection guide and fill the number you selected in the first blank. Then complete the rest of the sentence. Press pause to complete this brief stop and do activity. Welcome back. Now it's time to do a deeper reflection on engagement through formative assessment. Take this time to think about all of the strategies that we discussed for formative assessment and write down which of them that you want to take back to your instruction. You can also write down any other engaging formative assessment ideas that you might have. Press pause when you are ready to begin this stop and do activity. Press play to resume the webinar. Welcome back. Now that we've wrapped up our discussion of engagement through formative assessment, I'm going to share some other exciting strategies that you can use to keep your students actively engaged in instruction. Total physical response is typically a strategy used to support English language learning because it uses both movement and language to support comprehension. This combination of movement and language is also what makes it such a great strategy to use for virtual learning. And it is precisely the movement that makes this strategy so engaging and fun. Students of all ages enjoy this strategy because it links motion to things like action words or content area vocabulary, such as the word bloom or parabola. This strategy is also great to break up the typical instruction time where students are sitting in their seats. By having students get out of their seats and making connections to motion and language, we are helping them build connections that are significantly stronger than if they were just listening or writing. Another great tool for engagement are scavenger hunts. First of all, they get students out of their seats to try to find the requested item or items. This is important to break up instruction and, like we discussed earlier, keeps our students' brains and bums from getting numb. Scavenger hunts also help build students' creativity and critical thinking because they have to apply the learning taking place to whatever items they are setting out to find. I will share some examples shortly. And finally, scavenger hunts are extremely versatile in their implementation. You can do them during synchronous instruction, which really boosts engagement, since students nearly always turn it into a race to see who can find the requested item and make it back to their screen first. Or you can have students complete the hunt independently during asynchronous time as a meaningful homework or application practice activity. You can even have students get creative and take pictures of their items or make a short video to share what they found. If you are in in-person setting, scavenger hunts still work great to get students moving around the classroom, or they can even explore outside around the campus. Another reason why scavenger hunts are so engaging is because they can be completed in any content area to support students' learning. Here are some social studies and literacy examples. In literacy, you can find things that help support phonics, such as an item that begins with the B sound, or an item that rhymes with the word cat. In social studies, you can have students apply their learning by finding things like an example of a good or a service, or finding a primary source, or even something around their house that was made before they were born. Here are some math and science examples. In math, you can have students find an example of the number 5, or a real-world example of a particular shape, or an array. In science, students can look for things that can melt or can conduct electricity, or find something that flies. No matter what you set your students out to find, scavenger hunts are a great way to keep your students engaged. The next strategy that I'm going to share with you is called Explore, Explain, Apply. I want you to say those 3 words with me so that we can really let them sink in. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Explore, explain, apply. Now, the reason this strategy is so exciting is that it uses project-based approach. And no matter whether you are learning in person or in a virtual learning environment, this strategy builds lots of autonomy for students, as well as exceptional engagement. So as we dive into this strategy, I want you to understand that Explore, Explain, Apply is meant for students to dive into content to build a deeper understanding of a concept. Today, I'm going to use the example of the planets to explain how this strategy works, but it's important to understand that you could use any content, from shapes to plant life cycles to World War II. It doesn't matter the content, the strategy stays the same. The goals of this lesson are for students to discover all of the planets, to identify commonalities between the planets, and to be able to distinguish between the planets and know which one is which. We are first going to talk about the explore phase of the strategy so that we understand what it looks like and how to help students be successful. During the explore phase, there are so many opportunities for active engagement for students. When I think of this phase, I think of things in two categories. The first is the what students are exploring. The second is how they are exploring the materials, the skills they are using. In a virtual setting or an in-person experience, there are so many different mediums for content that students can explore. They can explore books or ebooks, articles, pictures, videos, audiobooks or podcasts, or even virtual expeditions or field trips. And while they are exploring these materials, they are practicing skills such as discovering, questioning, gathering, and identifying information, and using communication skills to respond. Now, all of this sounds amazing, but how do we actually get our students to be able to do this successfully so they can build their independence and direct their own work? In order to do this, we need to clearly set the expectations for our students. They need to understand that they are supposed to be able to identify the planets and talk about how they are the same and how they are different. We also need to plan guiding questions in case students get stuck along the way. And it's also important for students to have a clear method and opportunity to collect, record, and organize information so that they can access it later on in the explain and apply phases of the strategy. Our oldest students, high school and the end of middle school, have likely developed the skills necessary to explore articles, books, and videos on a topic on their own. But for our elementary students, and likely our early middle schoolers, it's important to provide some structure for their exploration. One way to do this could look like this. You explain to your students that over the next few days during their independent work time, they are to explore the materials you have provided for them. You have given them access to a book, a couple articles, a video clip, some pictures that you annotated, as well as a virtual field trip that they could take. Now, it doesn't have to be 6 things. It could be 12 things. It could be 4 things. The point is that there are a variety of things for them to interact with, and that you give them autonomy in their exploration. For example, they have to pick at least one thing you have given them to read and at least one thing you have given them to look at. Then they have to use whatever note-taking guide or information sheet to collect the information that they have learned. That might look like writing down facts or summaries. It might involve drawing pictures or diagrams to demonstrate their learning. It could even be bulleted notes. The way they collect the information should be appropriate to their developmental readiness level. Or, if you don't prefer the layout on the previous page, you could organize the exploration in a must-do, may-do chart. The blue represents the content that all students must explore. The purple represents the content that is optional for students to explore. Again, the emphasis is on student choice, giving them the power to choose the kinds of materials that they want to learn from. On a side note, this color coding is especially helpful for young students and English language learners so that they know exactly what they need to complete. Also, for this phase, it is important to make sure that the content you are giving students is appropriate for their reading readiness level. If you have emerging or early readers or language learners in your class, you may need to provide more audiobooks, videos, and pictures for them to learn from, rather than lots of books or articles that they have to read on their own. One of the questions that often comes up about Explore, Explain, Apply is how long does this take? And although that's a great question, I can't really answer that for you. That is a question that you get to answer based on your particular students and the specific content that you are working with. For example, this unit on planets may take 4 weeks, so you may decide that you want to let your students explore for 2 weeks, and then the explain and apply take the next 2 weeks. The explain phase is what we are going to look at now. In the explain phase, this is where you come in as the teacher to help students make connections. You may spend some of this time actually teaching or tying information together. As you check in with students and review the information they've gathered during the explore phase, you may notice that students have gaps in their learning or made errors in their connections. So you may have to fill in some gaps or help students organize the information differently. You may want to provide additional information that students did not receive during the exploration phase. This could be a specific book or article that is above their independent reading level, so you wanted to do a read aloud or a shared reading experience to ensure that students are comprehending the material. You may also need to set up additional frameworks for students to help them organize the information as well. The explain phase is the perfect opportunity for you to ask students questions, for them to ask you questions, and to encourage conversation and collaboration. The last thing I want to mention about the explain phase is that it doesn't have to be linear. It's okay for students to explore for a while, then you explain to help them make connections, and then they explore some more, and you explain, and so on and so on. The final phase is where we take all of the pieces that students have learned and put them together. During the apply phase, students are putting together everything they have learned to apply it to some kind of activity or task. This could be some kind of project or experiment, something they actually create, or some kind of data collection. The application might even take the form of some kind of written, oral, or video response. And just like the other phases, it is extremely important to set clear expectations and guidelines for this application activity. Students have to understand what they are supposed to do and how they are to show what they've learned. Often sharing the rubric or whatever evaluation tool you plan to use for the application activity will be helpful so that students understand exactly how they will be graded and what you expect of their finished work. It is also important to create a cycle for feedback. If you are not teaching in person, you don't have the opportunity to watch alongside students as they work on this application piece to help provide redirection or probing questions when needed. So you have to create some kind of regular way to check in with students in order for them to show you their progress and to ask any questions. One way to do this is for students to submit a brief video diary of their progress each week, and you send a video response back with feedback and answers to their questions. Or you could schedule a one-on-one or small group live meeting instead so that students are showing you their progress live and you are able to answer their questions in real time. In addition to the suggestions I just shared, there are many other ways that you can provide feedback to students to keep them engaged and motivated in their work. You could use virtual stickers or annotate students' work through a shared document. If general feedback needs to be shared with the whole group, you could showcase student work in the whole group setting so that all students hear the same message. You could also send audio or video to students with feedback or schedule office hours for an open Q&A that anyone in class can attend. Now it's time for our next Stop and Do activity. In your Learning Reflection Guide, you have a recap of the Explore, Explain, Apply strategy. Review the process and think about the upcoming content-focused units you will be teaching. Plan out how you might incorporate this strategy into one of those upcoming units, including any ideas you have for application projects or tasks. Press pause when you are ready to begin this stop and do activity. Press play to resume the webinar. The last engagement strategy that I'm going to share today is called Fun Time Fridays. This is basically a weekly celebration that happens every Friday. It gives students something to look forward to each week and helps build relationships and classroom community. This is especially important for virtual learning, where students don't get the opportunity to interact with their peers in a relaxed setting at school, such as lunch or recess. However, it is equally valuable for in-person learning to maintain and strengthen student relationships throughout the school year. The great thing about Fun Time Fridays is that it can be anything you and your students want it to be. You can do the same thing each week, or change it up every week. It's really up to you. Here are some ideas to get your creative juices flowing. You could share a favorite stuffed animal, or have a dance party. You could tell jokes and have students tell jokes. You could do 2 truths and a lie. Finally, you could share something that students are proud of, something they've made or something they've earned. Maybe it's a piece of art, or a sports trophy, or some kind of experiment or Lego that they have built. Now it's time for our last stop and do activity. For this activity, I want you to think back to all of the strategies and information that I've shared today. You are going to write down 3 things you've learned, 2 ideas you want to talk about with your colleagues, and 1 thing you want to investigate further or learn more about. Press pause when you are ready to begin this stop and do activity. Press play to resume the webinar. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that summary task as a way to synthesize your learning from the day. I want to thank you so much for your time today. And as I look back on our goals for today, I feel pretty confident that we achieved them through the information that I shared and the work that you did in the Learning Reflection Guide. If you'd like to learn more from teacher-created materials, check out the free professional learning options at the link shown on the screen. And remember, we want to support you no matter where you are teaching today and in the future. Because as a company founded and run by teachers, we know your time is valuable. We appreciate you spending some of that time with us and hope that this training will help you incorporate engaging instructional strategies into your virtual classroom and beyond. And of course, to help you create a world in which your students love to learn. Thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful school year.